Hey everyone, today I thought it would be fun to make a video uh, for reading some of these Tales from the Doghouse stories. So, I'm sick and tired of a loveless, sexless life. I feel like 60% of the time I bitch about the dog. 2 days ago, I woke up at 4 a.m. to tell my dog nutter boyfriend that his dog shit all over my side of our bedroom. He was mad at me for not helping him, even though it's his dog, and I would never ask him for help if one of my two cats did something like that. But they could never. His dog shat in a 5 foot radius because he's gigantic, also somehow getting shit on our wall. Before I have the whole, if we break up, you can't afford rent and the dog together, or I will not be able to find a girlfriend because of that thing, talk. How can I get him to get rid of this dog? I'm so close to burning everything down. For the past 3 years, my boyfriend hasn't been able to see my family during the holidays because he can't get care for his dog. Then he complains that he never gets to do anything during the holidays. I'm so done. But I love this man, and he can't see past this fucking 100-pound beast. Aw, man. Uh, I mean, first of all, dogs are absolutely disgusting, and this is a problem I see a lot of the time in these relationships is the men seem to, and that, not just the men, but oftentimes, because women are generally the ones held responsible for, the majority of the uh, cleaning and just like home domestic labor. A lot of these nutter guys expect their girlfriends or wives to really just take care of the dog and the aspects of the dog that are least enjoyable, like cleaning up a 5 foot radius of shit that sprayed all over the walls and stuff. So honestly, my advice in these situations would be to leave. I realize that that's not always realistic advice, and a lot of these people don't want to leave, but I could never imagine living like that. Why would anyone willfully choose to come home to piles on their floor? Do you have any idea how often I've come home to find a river of piss or piles of crap right at our front door? Prime place to step in it as soon as you walk in the house. My family has suffered through it for most of my childhood, but I only recently, within the last year or two, had enough and realized I just don't like dogs. People may say, well, you've got to train them. Why would anyone want an animal you have to spend hours upon hours training just so it won't defecate in your house, ruin your carpets, rip up your furniture, and essentially ruin all your stuff? And I'm the crazy one? I've been trying to figure this out myself. I'm caring for my mom who's elderly in her home. She has this old dog who is the bane of my existence and is not housebroken. This dog uses puppy pads, which is a little bit better than nothing at all. But it is me and my son who have to clean those up. The dog will miss the pad and go right on the carpet as well. It is disgusting. I don't hate dogs, but I also don't want to own dogs. They're too high maintenance and expensive. I can't give any energy to a dog, nor can I afford it. Again, I will never understand why people deal with dogs who aren't housebroken. I don't understand why people deal with dogs at all, especially when this is, I mean, even people that claim to have trained dogs or house trained dogs, they still seem to have like shit and piss all up in their house. The dog's hair and danders everywhere. They rub their anal glands all over the floors. Like, there's essentially no way to live in a clean home with dogs at all. And that's not even to mention like the noise pollution. Let's see. What else have we got here? It has to end soon. I've posted a few times about the dog I have been unhappily living with for almost 6 years now. Even typing that out is just. Anyway, the situation has, not surprisingly, gotten much worse. The dog is 15. It isn't some little 5 pound rat dog that lives to be like 20. It's an 80-pound bully breed. Or at least it was 80 pounds. I think the vet paperwork said 70 now, but whatever. It's old, is the point. A couple months ago, I posted about how awful the dog had deteriorated and how much it has been affecting my mental health, relationship, and life in general. The dog should have been put down then, but my partner selfishly could not let go, and everyone, dog included, was suffering as a result. Last week, the dog started acting strange, and long story short, it ended up having multiple seizures. I'm sure you're thinking, well, that's awful. He let it go so long that it suffered a slow, painful death. And it would be awful, except this dog is still hanging on. When I went to sleep that night, I thought for sure I'd wake up to the dog bed being empty, but instead I woke up and had to stall my 4-year old upstairs because the dog was in its bed having another seizure. Apparently, my partner took it to an emergency 24-hour vet, and he admitted that he genuinely thought he was taking the dog and not bringing it back home. But the vet suggested a shot and anticonvulsant pills instead. This is a vet that does not know this dog's history or my partner, and I want to find him and slap him quite honestly because WTF. It's obviously possible my partner lied to me and refused advice to euthanize. Who knows anymore? So now this geriatric dog is taking daily pain meds on top of gabapentin, on top of 1,000 milligrams of anticonvulsant pills 3 times a day, every day, indefinitely. I looked it up online, and this is apparently an unusually high dose. What is the cause of the seizures? Who fucking knows? Nobody even cares at this point. It's extremely obvious that this is just hospice care to keep it as comfortable as possible until it passes. There's no interest in running any tests, as quite clearly nothing can be done at this dog's age and in its condition. So now, the hell that I thought I lived in a year ago and even a few months ago now seems like a cakewalk compared to what I'm in now. This thing is basically a shell of a dog, and I can't even fathom how my partner can tolerate seeing it like this. It's become too difficult for me to even manage, since he can barely get up. Occasionally he can stand, but more often than not, he's not able to. This means he can't hardly reposition himself on the bed even. Can't drink water independently. We need to help it get to the water dish. This dog is literally just being kept alive. For what? I don't know. There's no way in hell this dog is enjoying any of its life. It sleeps pretty much 18 hours of the day. Maybe an hour or two is taken up with getting out to poop and eating. The rest is just laying there. The last time I felt this fed up when I made my last post, I had agreed with my therapist to tell my partner that my son and I are staying at my parents' house until he makes the decision. That I cannot force him to euthanize, but I refuse to take part in keeping a suffering animal alive. Well, I asked my mother and she said no. It has caused so many fights, the house is so full of tension and frustration, the dog is not able to properly function independently, so care is needed basically always. My partner thinks he can drive home on his half-hour lunch break. We live 15 minutes away to meet this dog's needs. He most certainly cannot, and the dog has needs outside of a half-hour designated time slot. Tonight, the dog tried to stand, fell, and pooped on the floor as I was sitting there eating my dinner. This was my final straw. Something has just broken in me. My partner was like, I'll take my break now. I told him, don't bother. When he called me, I was crying. I told him I can't just leave feces on my living room floor and make the dog wait 20 minutes for him to get home. I cannot live this way anymore. I can't do it. The dog can't do it. It can't even drink water on its own, for God's sake. After a few minutes of this, I realized he was silent and not yelling defensively like he usually does. Then I got a very quiet, I'm sorry. He sounded defeated. I think reality is finally hitting him. This can't go on. I softened my tone at that point and told him I know this is hard for him and I'm sorry, but I just can't live like this. He's alluded to the notion that he's waiting for my son's birthday to come and go so that the dead dog is not overshadowing my son's special day. I have to interject. You think like dog shitting all over and having seizures is not going to put a damper on your son's birthday? Anyways, my fear would be in this situation that as soon as this dog finally kicks the bucket, her husband is literally just gonna go get another one. He sounds like a complete nutter, obsessed with dogs. So I really feel bad for these people in these situations. And it's truly insane, like how much trauma and fighting and drama and tension and anger is caused by these animals, like when there's literally just no need to even have them in the first place. Let's find another one. I don't know anymore. Didn't know whether to tag this as dog culture or food safety, but to be honest, it's both. Yeah. Yeah, these things intersect quite often. Okay, so at meal times, particularly dinner, my parents like to get a bowl of dog food for him to put on the floor so he can eat with us. I can just about tolerate this. However, they also like to get him another smaller bowl of food to feed him. This gets on my nerves because they then complain about how he won't eat his dog food on the floor if he doesn't eat it. Admittedly, he does usually eat it, but when they get confused, it frustrates me. Another thing they will do is if their dog comes to me for food and I don't give him any, they will try to guilt trip me into it. I usually end up giving him food, but it's to stop them guilt tripping me, not because I want to. Gross. Man, it's just sad how many people are forced to live in these situations, and this is considered, completely normal for so many people. I'm trying to keep it together. My father's eating a snack, and of course, my parents' gluttonous beast lumbers over as soon as something edible is within sight of it. Now it's sitting at his feet, giving him a dead stare right into my father's soul, silently begging for just the smallest morsel, as if it doesn't eat all day. Where would this dog possibly get the idea that it could get fed from his plate? Couldn't be because my parents give them food from their plate, surely. Sarcasm. I've asked multiple times how they can sit there and not get fuming angry when the dogs all gather round the feet of whomever has just sat down with food. My mother says she just tries her best to ignore it. Why not put them outside when you eat? Oh, yeah, probably because they can't be out for longer than 5 minutes before they start barking at the neighbors. Guys, I need to calm down, but I just wanted to vent to people that understand my frustration. I can't wait until I move out of this house and away from these animals. Yeah, there's a lot of kids, a lot of people still living with their parents on this subreddit who are constantly talking about how they can't wait to get away from their nutter parents. And that's honestly really sad. But I totally get it, and I would feel the same way. And I'm sure that they won't look forward to coming back to even visit, like on holidays when the dogs are still going to be begging for food during Thanksgiving dinner and things like that. And then the parents are, the nutter parents are going to be like, why do the kids never visit? I don't know. The barking, the barking, the barking. Every single day, my family's dogs go outside and bark because my neighbors always leave their dogs outside and they always bark too. I do not think I have slept past 6 a.m. for almost 2 years now. I think I am seriously gonna lose it. Yeah, this is part of dog culture that affects. This is this is how this is why it's important to talk about dog culture and dogs and dog owners because if somehow these dogs were always just in these owners' homes and the only people getting annoyed or harassed or kept awake at all hours of the day and night, uh, but that's not the case. This affects the neighbors, it affects the entire neighborhood, the community. Um, these beasts just shouldn't be kept in human civilizations. Like, there's no reason for it, there's no benefit other than the selfishness of the dog owners themselves claiming they get some kind of, emotional support or impact, or they just really love dogs and have to have them. I can't think of a single other thing in our society that causes the amount of stress, violence, um, noise pollution that like than dogs. Like, can you name any other thing? Oh man, this one looks interesting. My family is a family of crappy owners. A bit of a rant here. My aunt had a cane corso, high breed standards, and eventually they decided to find a male to sell the puppies. But in this economy, not everyone can afford a dog worth $2,000. So three were left. What did she do? Gave them to her brothers. My uncle had eight other rescued rabbit-sized animals, which are usually not getting along with dogs. but they still took the puppy, which eventually grew into a 60-kilogram hungry, hyperactive machine, which led to uh, the rescues peeing in random places because the dog scent was everywhere. Of course, nobody bothered to introduce the new one to them. Sometimes there was fights between them. Neighbors weren't happy about the noises, and my uncle did nothing. Then my father, he also took a 5-month-old puppy from my aunt, not bothering to ask permission from his mother, wife, and kids. We had a 2-room apartment. One room belonged to us and the other to my grandma. So the dog was placed in a room in which 4 people already lived. I'll remind you, this is a cane corso. They grow taller than a dinner table. It eats a lot and often has health issues because it was created by humans. We had no money to pay for our own healthcare and food. We absolutely could not afford a freaking dog. It will protect you, you will see. In 2024, I was against it all from the beginning, but I was underage, so I had no voice, even though they knew I don't like dogs. Both my parents worked 8 to 6, and the dog is a living being. It would pee and shit on the floor if we didn't walk it in time. So me, wimpy preteen who had no physical strength at all, had to walk him in public parks so he doesn't shit on the carpet. The dog was trained a bit, but still could be distracted by other dogs barking. When my father walked with him, he often didn't put a leash or muzzle because he's trained and he will not attack anyone. Go fuck yourself, Dad. You're the reason some people are scared of dogs. Yeah, this is unbelievably irresponsible, taking a cane corso out off leash. I wonder where this is because it doesn't look like English is necessarily his first language. When I walked with the dog, I always put on all this stuff, but I knew that if he decides to run for some aggressive chihuahua without a leash, I won't be able to stop him. Also, as a socially anxious person, it was difficult for me to leave the house alone. So those walks always turned out very stressful for me, to the point I could get anxiety attacks in the end if we encountered other people with dogs. But my father didn't care because his sister had one small room apartment and could not keep more than one dog. In the end, she had kept 2 cane corsos in a one-room apartment. Man, these people are absolutely insane. We also had another dog, which lived in village but was too old for it, so we decided to take him back to the city. 2 male dogs, 2 rooms, none were neutered. We had to keep those two away from each other, and when we failed, they ended up fighting. It was my fault, not on purpose. One time, my mother broke a small chair on the head of the dogs. She did it to stop the dog from killing the other dog. What a good thing for kids to see. Yeah, that brings up a really good point. Is that kids who grow up in these dog households they grow up in chaos, filth. It's just unfair to them. And hopefully, a lot of them grow up and realize they never want dogs of their own. But at the same time, I think some just grow up feeling that that's normal. And, they kind of get used to the chaos and filth and stuff and end up living the same way later on, too. The cane corso is still living with us, and now my father's in a different country, planning to stay there for a few months more. He left this dog with us. We need to cut the dog's claws because they don't wear out on their own, and the dog struggles to walk. The dog is terrified of this and will bite if we try to do it. Yeah, these kids are gonna get seriously hurt by this cane corso. So they have to go, I guess, take the dog to the vet and pay to have its claws cut. The worst part is the vet is 20 kilometers away, so you need to drive a car to go there. None of us can do that for different reasons, and they don't know anyone that could help them. Wow. The interesting thing about this subreddit is that it's not like Dogfree. Um, it's a lot of people on here are still fairly sympathetic to dogs or liked dogs until they got one or had to live with one and are coming here to vent about it. Just broke up with my girlfriend. She just adopted a dog. How do people think like this? She went to the pet store, had a choice of a million different animals, and chose a gluttonous mutt. She said, "Oh, look at the little cutie patootie." It was a golden retriever. Gol- Golden retrievers are putrid beings put on earth by God. And my girlfriend's saying it's cute. Am I justified? Wait, why did I ask that? The answer is yes, I am justified. I don't want that impotent, dreadful being, always slobbering, making messes. Unbelievable. Correction. Golden retrievers were not put on Earth by God. They were created by humans selectively breeding canines to be docile parasites with no survival skills outside of looking cute and making narcissists feel good about themselves. So true. I actually want to go to Dogfree, and this is something I've been meaning to revisit a little bit. I'll probably make a separate video too, but if you go to Dogfree and just look up brood parasite, there's a lot of interesting uh, posts here, and this is actually where I got the initial idea that dogs are actually brood parasites. Okay, so here's this post from Arthropod from Space. The dog is a brood parasite. I want to share here my theory. Did you ever see a photo of a bird feeding a cuckoo chick 3 times bigger than itself? It seems weird that bird can't recognize it is not its baby and is feeding it despite the fact that it looks obviously different than its own expected babies. Moreover, this cuckoo earlier pushed all the host parent eggs out of the nest and develops for a long enough time to prevent host's second breeding attempt during the season. So it seriously harms the host's reproduction ability. It seems almost funny that bird is so silly that it's unable to recognize the cuckoo and stop caring for it. But I think a significant percentage of humanity was caught by the same mechanism. And brood parasite of our species is of course the dog. A cuckoo in its early stages of development tries to mimic host eggs and chicks, but later it switches to overstimulate it. It behaves in a way that triggers parental instincts in birds, but much more than their normal offspring should. It chirps louder and more often, has more brightly colored inside of beak, and is bigger, so it uses supernormal stimulus mechanism. So its host parents care for it even better than they would for their own babies. Dogs do the same. Most dog breeds mimic human baby traits, both in behavior and appearance. Of course, they were bred this way by humans, but humans choose to breed these dogs which they perceived as more cute, which means they activated their parental instincts. Dogs very often behave like very young human child who needs help. They play dumb, need attention, emulate love behavior, and whine for the slightest discomfort so humans feel pity for it. Also, many dog breeds look like plushy toys. They have a large head compared to the body, short legs, and a body proportion not uh, carnivore, not like the carnivore they are, but of a human baby. In nature, there's a thin line between symbiosis and parasitism, and many species of parasites evolved from long ago symbiotes. Humans and early dogs started as a symbiotic species. They both helped each other and complemented their weaknesses. This I actually want to push back on a little bit. I think that symbiosis is overstated to some extent. Anyways, after, humans didn't need dogs anymore for any useful purpose, they evolved to occupy the niche of brood parasite. Like I said, kind of partially disagree with that. I think they have always been more of a brood parasite, and maybe there were cases in which we found useful endeavors for them to engage in, but I don't necessarily think they were as useful as we're led to believe. So, this could explain the extremely irrational nutter behavior, overly protective and unrealistic, blind to the dangerous nature of dogs as well as the filth. And then here's a comment from Tom Quixote. who I think also made a post about this, and he makes a lot of really great comments. I completely agree that they are parasites, and I and many others have posted several times here about it. There was even a newspaper article published once. I'm completely sure that you're right that they are parasites in human society. However, I think there are two things in your post I am not quite sure are actually true, at least open to discussion. First, you write that humans are the ones who actively bred dogs to be parasites by choosing the dogs that were seen as more cute. I think they actually became parasites first, and only long after they entered human caveman society did people start to breed them actively. I agree. I believe that this is true, and yeah, it's borne out by some evidence. The argument for this is that dogs have evolved a special, small muscle in their eye that allows them to make human like facial expressions that trigger our pity. Wolves cannot do this. This suggests that the main parasitic adaptation happened without input from people. Also, finds of dog bones show that dogs entered human society much earlier than we started domesticating and breeding other animals such as cattle. Secondly, I think it's very possible that the human dog relationship was never symbiotic as most people assume. I think it was parasitic from the start. That's what I also believe after researching this a bit more. Um, I we had a voice chat on Animal and Control about this called The Dog Father. So I go into actually some articles and studies to support that. It's possible that even the earliest humans convinced themselves that they got benefit from the dog, just like people today claim all kinds of weird benefits from having these things around, such as lowering anxiety, saving people in various ways, even teaching kids to read. Also, I think that for the earliest humans, it would not have been help to have a dog with them on a hunt. On the contrary, it would likely have scared away wildlife, both by smell and by barking. Early humans used their intelligence, weapon skills, and teamwork to catch and bring down prey. A dog would have just been a problem for them. I totally agree with that. And there's a comment that says, interesting, wouldn't it make more sense to eat the dog that wanders down into the community? There's actually some archaeological evidence that, to the extent dogs were um, used in more ancient human civilizations, they were actually, I think this may be from like China, they were actually used as a food source. Um, so I just think this is a really fascinating theory to me. I actually think that this is true, and I think it's unlikely in the current time we're gonna get legit research on this because nutters. But here is the post from Tom Quixote. Looking for scientific studies on the topic of dogs as parasites in human society. It seems to me to be pretty obvious that dogs are essentially parasites in human society. Not as some random insult, but that dogs are literally brood parasites. Just like the cuckoo lays its eggs in the nests of other birds and tricks them to feed the cuckoo chick, dogs have evolved traits that make them irresistible to many people, who actively seek them out, feed them, and care for them in every way, even treating them better than their own children in many cases. And yeah, like those cases I was reading earlier, you'll see that on Tales from the Doghouse all the time. But when I'm Googling around for scientific papers investigating this idea, I find nothing at all. Is anyone here aware of any interesting studies or investigations done on this topic? I understand that a lot of people will argue that the human dog relationship is not parasitic but symbiotic, since both sides allegedly benefit from it. My view is that all these supposed benefits from regular dog ownership are illusory, and that it's simply part of the dog's parasitism. It displays behavior that trigger an emotional response, and people then make up pseudological arguments to defend that imagined emotional connection. I think he's spot on. Just as an example of the kind of parasites I'm talking about, here's a case from the world of butterflies and ants. The Alcon blue is a brood parasite, the insect world's equivalent of the cuckoo. David Nash and European colleagues found that its caterpillars are coated in chemicals that smell very similar to those used by the two species it uses as hosts. To ants, these chemicals are badges of identity, and the caterpillars smell so familiar that the ants adopt them and raise them as their own. This is extremely interesting to me because I don't know if any of you have ever noticed this weird phenomenon with nutters where they are obsessed with the smell of puppies and the smell of puppies' breath. Like if you Google puppy breath, you'll find all kinds of people saying how much they wish they could bottle that smell. They love it. They let the puppies, just lick all over their face and nose. They're like inhaling the scent of puppy breath. I actually wish there could be like a chemical analysis of that and see if there's any type of chemical markers in puppy breath that stimulate or that simulate uh like the scent of a human baby or something, because you know how people love the smell of babies and mothers can recognize their own baby from the smell of his head or her head. And babies have kind of a distinct baby smell if you've ever been around like newborns. I really wonder if there's anything with that. Um, the more exacting the caterpillar's chemicals, the higher its chances of being adopted. The alien larvae are bad news for the colony, for the ants fawn over them at the expense of their own young, which risk starvation. If a small nest takes in even a few caterpillars, it has more than a 50% chance of having no brood of its own. I mean, this is interesting stuff, guys. Like to me, this is like cutting edge of dog culture critique, because a lot of people are always asking why. Why do people put up with this? Why do people live? The dog's tearing up their homes, costing thousands of dollars in damages, shitting and pissing everywhere, destroying the carpet. And it's like no matter what these dogs do and how much of a hassle they are, people are obsessed with them. Uh, I think this is just really, really a great line of thinking and trying to really understand what's going on here. Um, so let's see. Yeah, I agree. It's different. It's difficult to find any studies on this because no one seriously researches anything that is even mildly critical of dogs at this point or dog ownership. Even the other day when I was reading all those articles about the very many zoonotic diseases that dogs pass to humans, every single article was like, although, you could lose your limbs from capnocytophaga, dogs are really good for your health. They lower your blood pressure and stuff. I actually, after I read this originally, and like I said, if you go to that, the Dog Father voice chat on Animal Uncontrol's channel, I found not really much and not really good research, but there were a couple of articles that literally said, uh, hey humans, dogs are parasites scientifically, but they're so cute and fluffy, they're the best parasites in the world. Like, um, so another banger from Tom. Brood parasitism is not only derogatory, it's a valid scientific concept being studied. And the key to it is that the parasitic species sends the same signals as the host organism's own offspring does, making it irresistible for the host to protect and feed the parasite. Since humans are a cultural and social species, this involves not being allowed to criticize the parasite since it's somehow seen on the same level as real children. This is true and also interesting because a related concept to brood parasitism is something called social parasitism, and there are species that engage in what's called social parasitism, which is similar but distinct. I think the dog could almost be doing both things here since humans are such a social species. So that's where we get things like dogs are family, dog mom or dad. And speaking negatively about dogs is seen as taboo. Maybe that's also why there are no scientific studies on it. I think that that is definitely true. Okay, let's find, what does this say? Yeah, of course, dogs and humans are not the same thing. That this only seems to need to be said because dogs are filling a role as a brood parasite. Okay, 5 months ago, People Before Pets asks, are dogs a parasite of people? I seem to be immune. The strong attachment and engagement effect that dogs seem to have on many people is entirely lost on me. I don't find myself interested in greeting dogs, nor do I ascribe to them any semblance of anthropomorphized humanity in their personality, intelligence, or communication. I apparently see dogs for more or less what they are today, a successful opportunistic species that has invaded the domain of humans and benefited generously as a result. A question I have had is whether or not it is appropriate to consider the relationship that many dogs have with people with as being parasitic. Humans tend to associate parasites as being creatures that we can clearly see as feeding off a host. We look at most examples of parasitism in nature and observe what clearly looks like a bad arrangement for the host. We tend to think to ourselves, as higher thinking humans, I would never let a parasite do that to me. I'm not so sure that everyone has that awareness, especially dog lovers. Is the relationship that much of humanity has with dogs parasitic? People who like dogs would probably suggest that the relationship between dogs and humans has clear benefits for dogs, but that it is also symbiotic. The implication is that humans and dogs are using one another for the mutual advancement of both. In distant history, as humans and canines learned that they could work together to hunt and forage, the argument about a symbiotic relationship between the species has more merit. Today, probably not as much. See, but like Tom, I don't agree with this, that humans and canines learned to work together to hunt. No. Proto dog, which is the ancestor that branched off from wolves, um, didn't have some kind of mutual cooperation with humans. It was literally a parasite that lived like a scavenging pest that lived on the outskirts of human settlements. I really think that this idea of like a symbiotic evolution is, if not outright untrue, like vastly overstated or overestimated. Consider the sheer volume of all the dogs in the world compared to other mammals and life forms. While most other large mammals have been gradually disappearing from this planet because few can successfully compete with humans in any given environment, dog numbers are massive. Dogs, like cattle, are raised and protected by humans, which accounts for their very large numbers. From a biological competitiveness standpoint, this is a win for canines because they are succeeding in the game for genetic dominance over so many others. By co opting the protection of humans, dogs as a species have ensured a relatively successful strategy for reproduction and survival. Whether or not there is a parasitic relationship with humans, the vast majority of dogs in existence today are here because of humans wanting it so. The remaining question isn't if humans are responsible for the proliferation of dog life, but rather if humans are doing so in their best interest, especially when judged through the lens of a modern urban existence. What leads me to believe that dogs enjoy some manner of parasitism over humans is judged by the way that many humans talk about dogs. Rarely do dog owners attribute more factual labels to their pets, describing them as a dog, pet, property, etc. Rather, they speak of them as though they are anything from a blood child to a dear romantic companion. None of this is correct despite the strong feelings on behalf of the owners. What exactly is going on here? My theory is that dogs, willingly or unwillingly, have exploited a processing weakness in the human mind. And I'll say I don't think it's willing or unwilling on the part of dogs. I think it's just you know, an in, uh, an environmental niche that these dogs happened to be able to exploit, not by any cunning or intention on their part, but just by, nature itself playing out this way. The human brain evolved the clever ability to make sense out of nonsense. When we see only a part of a picture or understand only part of a story, our brain fills in the rest to compensate for what is missing. We also tend to have a very positive bias when doing so. That means the missing elements are filled in with what we want to be there, as opposed to what actually is. This has the effect of making vague looking faces more attractive in our minds than they might actually be. The positive bias also seems to suggest to some people, that a dog is in fact a human child, or that a dog's dependence on its owner for food and survival is akin to human love. Dogs thus emulate behavior humans expect to see from young humans, or suggest complicity with our personality that we actually want from another being. In other words, I have a feeling that dogs have hacked many people's minds into believe that by taking care of the dog and having a relationship with it, they are in fact following their biological imperative to do the same but with an actual human being. Humans are known for accepting alternatives to the real thing, and their relationship with dogs is probably a perfect example of people accepting a poor alternative for a relationship with an actual human being. There have been science fiction stories about alien life forms tricking humans into caring for their young as though they were a human baby. In those stories, the humans are under some type of spell or trance that disguises the true identity of the parasitic alien life form they're taking care of. In those stories, the humans who are tricked into such a care relationship with the client are disgusted and dismayed if the spell is broken and the true nature of their actions is revealed. Is this not what is happening with humans and dogs? Are there not many humans who are pouring money and care and time into something they seem to believe is a human child? Are primal human instincts being co opted by dogs when those feelings are more authentically intended for fellow humans? Spare me from having to detail the many humiliating ways in which humans nurture dogs like babies or small children. Clearly, these animals are not going to grow up and attend trade school. In fact, they are from a species that would sooner eat us than do the same thing. Dogs may be a social species with basic behavioral analogs to human group hierarchies, but the care that goes into them by humans isn't anything but a loss for the human species. Maybe this doesn't really matter and people should be free to be infected by a brain parasite. And I think here it's, not a literal brain parasite. That's not how brood parasitism works. Um, there are people who strongly believe that. I, however, worry about the cumulative effect of so much money, time, and care being funneled to dogs when humans need it so very badly. For all the disenfranchised people out there who would give anything for the love of a mother, why are so many women dedicated to providing the best possible maternal care to a living toy they keep at home? I was under the impression that we encourage children to stop playing with dolls when they're at a young age. Yet our society is entirely permissive of grown adults collectively pretending their pets are part of their family. It sounds to me like the result of a very successful parasitic relationship. I have very little insight as to what is happening in the minds of people who are so overcome by their relationship with their dog. I can't relate to them, and when I try to have even the most mild discussion on the topic, I'm treated with immediate defensiveness and hostility. You see a similar reaction when you suggest to an addict that they take a break from whatever substance they're addicted to. The sheer violence of the response to the suggestion that someone's relationship with their dog is weird should be indicative of the powerful mental grasp these animals have on their hosts. No human would willingly give so much power and resources to a competitive species, and yet so many people in society do this with dogs. Is this not the outcome of a parasitic relationship? While I'm glad to be free of a parasitic dog in my home, I'm utterly surrounded by them in my life. Family members have distanced themselves from me merely for my suggestion that while guests are in their home, they put their dogs in isolation. I've had social and romantic connections severed, not because I attacked someone's dog owning preference, but because I did not validate it. That's sort of the interesting thing about people who are infected with dog attachment. They need to be around people who validate the psychosis. They lack any ability to defend themselves or justify their actions with the dogs. They simply cannot hear any disputes with their current lifestyle choices. No one needs to per se change for me, but to not even engage in a civilized debate? That sounds like the action of a person highly deluded by a dysfunctional relationship with a parasite. Tom again, with a great comment. Yes, dogs are brood parasites, but in any group of organisms, there will be some individuals with greater resistance to the parasite, and you seem to be one. One thing I'd like to note, though, is that I have seen zero evidence of dogs being useful in the distant past. People tend to just assume that they must have been useful, or they wouldn't have been taken into human society, but that doesn't need to be so. I agree. And then some people bring up like sled dogs and things like that. Tom answers that really well. He says, I know about sled dogs, but those are a much later invention. I'm talking about way back 30,000 years ago, when dogs first entered human society. You're just asserting that they helped drive prey, etc., but there is no evidence of that at all. They might just as well have been a hindrance to hunting because their barking scared other animals away. We only know the dogs were there because we found a few bones, but there's no information about what role they actually played in society, if any. So I agree, and I think I'll wrap it up there, but I'm planning on doing some more videos like this where I read through Reddit uh, posts, so let me know what you think.